Hi everybody. First of all, housework. I'm smoking my new sea urchin pipe, which is a little belter, and I'm using Mississippi River to christen it. Partly because I want it to be part of the story that I'm telling as we go along. This is going to be by way of experiment. I've got the title for the story, A Ball of Slimy Sea Worms, but that's about it. And I'm going to tell it as if I'm the main character in the story. I asked you to come and see me because we had something happen at the marine biology department last week. They'd been bringing up stuff from the Marianas Trench. You know, it's part of the deepest trench in the ocean, I think, virtually, certainly where we work. And my job is to sort out the new stuff, the unexpected stuff, classify it, and deal with it. Well, about a month ago, they brought up a ball of worms. These worms were about 4 foot long, and the ball was about 3 or 4 feet across. So it's quite a lot of worms in there. They thought I should be the one to deal with it because A, they were slimy, and B, nobody had ever seen anything like it before. They had no idea what they were. As far as they were concerned, they were a totally new species that had been found. I'm going to tell you what happened, and then I'm going to tell you what we did, and I really want your advice on whether you think we've done the right thing or whether you think we've done the wrong thing. I put the ball in my holding tanks, which I normally do for stuff from the very deeps to settle down. But I got the impression that this ball varied in depth. I don't know why, there was just something about it. They were all about the same colour, a sort of dirty greyish colour, these worms. They didn't look offensive or in any way yucky, you know, they were just there in this big ball. The difficulty we had was that they never seemed to leave the ball. They only circulated within that structure. So we had no idea what was in the middle of the ball. We had no idea exactly what their function was. They didn't seem to need to eat. And we had sort of plenty of mud at the bottom of this tank from the deep sea. And they didn't seem to leave the ball. And I was getting a bit fed up of them. You know, I'd sort of processed all the other stuff that had come in. I needed to separate them because how else could I categorize them? How else could I name them or find out a bit more about them? And sort of about the third day that they'd come in, I just happened to be walking past the tank and just sort of allowed my hands to run in the water as I walked along. And suddenly one of the worms started to leave the ball and come towards me. And as it did so, it wrapped itself around my right hand, and there was a purple slime came off, a bright, vivid purple. And then it sort of made its intention that it wanted to go across onto my other hand, which I allowed it to do because there was no adverse feeling or sensation from the purple. And it wrapped itself around that hand, and again, the purple slime. And then it just went back to the ball, reversed back into the ball, because it never really came fully out. And I really then was puzzled what was going on. The slime seemed to dissolve off my hand or dissolve into my hand, I'm not quite sure which. But anyway, I kept putting my hands in again and nothing happened. The ball just stayed the same, which was very frustrating. But when I got home, my wife said to me, "What's happened to your hands?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, your lichen planus seems to have gone." And what happened is I had lichen planus on my hands. They were like, little plates of skin that had discoloured and looked really rough, and I hadn't noticed that they'd gone. Now this really set me thinking, was it something to do with these slimy worms? We had a medical centre at the marine laboratory. So I went across to have a word with Bill, the doctor there, a good friend of mine, and somebody I knew I could trust to keep his mouth shut. He came over and looked at the worms, ran his hand in the water, nothing happened. And he sort of rang his daughter and said, "Would you like to come down to the laboratory, please? I've got something that I want to try." So as we were waiting for her to come down, he explained that she had some terrible warts on hand, and he tried everything to get rid of these warts. All the usual medical things, and he was thinking of eventually cutting them out. But he didn't want to do that because it was a bit drastic. His daughter Anne was about 16 years old. She was a teenager. And, for a girl that age, it's really embarrassing. Anne was one of those girls who isn't afraid of anything. She'd been in the laboratory too long with her dad and often came round when I had something strange in. So we just show her the worms, we didn't say anything. And I said, "Do you want to run your hands in the water?" And as soon as she put her hand in the water, the one with the warts on, another worm came away from the pack, or it might have been the same worm, I don't know. And it wrapped itself round her hand. But this time it was a grey slime all over her hand, and moved across to the other hand that didn't have any warts on, but just slimed that hand as well, and reversed back into the ball. And she took her hands out of the water, we gave her a towel and she wiped them, and the warts weren't there. They'd gone. And she was overjoyed, "What have you done?" And we said, "Look, you must not tell anyone about this. We've got to find out what's going on here." Anyway, we talked about it for a bit, decided that we had to keep fairly quiet about it. Because if we'd found this amazing healing ball of worms, you know, how the hell what were we going to do? You know, we couldn't separate them. We couldn't get them to do anything. It was only when people put their hand in the water, if they had something wrong, then the worms came out and did whatever they do. Anyway, we knew that one of the staff, the tea lady, she had stomach cancer. And while she was receiving treatment, it didn't seem to be helping it. So we didn't say anything to her. But Bob was in the room when she came. And she hated worms. You know, I mean, she just went spare when she saw them. But I said, no, go on, dip your hands in and see what happens, you know. And as soon as she put her hands in, a worm separated from the bunch and came towards her. And she wanted to pull her hands out. And I said, no, leave them there. Just watch what happens. And sure enough, the worm wrapped itself around her hands. And she said, oh, that's a funny feeling. And it was a bright blue slime. So we've had different coloured slimes. And it went onto her other hand and wrapped around that. And from the wrist down to the tips of her fingers were this bright blue slime. And she quickly pulled her hands out as the worm reversed back into the ball. And the slime seemed to disappear into her skin. So my friends have said to her, you know, when are you next time at the hospital? And she said, well, if I'm in too much pain, I can go any time I want. But I'm there in a week's time. So we didn't say anything, we just left it at that. A week's time, when she went to the hospital, Bill got a telephone call asking him to go in. So we'd sort of said that, look, you know, we can't sort of say what we've got here or what's happened. And he said, well, no, I don't intend to, but I want to find out what this is about. He went in and her specialist, the oncologist, sort of brought him into the room and said, you know, there's something happened here. The growth that she had has totally and utterly disappeared. There's not even a trace of it, which is really medically impossible. And I don't believe in miracles. And so I'm wondering what you've got at the Marine Biology Centre that she may have come into contact with. And Bill feigned ignorance and said, well, I really don't know. And he said, what did she say to you? And he said, well, she didn't say anything. She just looked surprised and was obviously overjoyed. And I asked her whether anything strange had happened, and she seemed to clam up a little bit, but she said no. And Bill said, well, I'm sorry, I've no idea. He said, I haven't really had a lot to do with her, because I knew she was under medical attention. And although theoretically I'm her doctor at the centre, I've left it to you. So anyway, he left the hospital at that and came to see me. And we had to decide what to do. The trouble we had was that we seemed to have something that could heal any illness for any people. But we couldn't separate the worms. We couldn't take samples of the slime because they only slimed when they were handled or when they came out to do their job. So what were we to do? Announce it and all hell would break loose and people would be turning up wanting to put their hands in the slime? keep quiet about it and do nothing? But eventually word would get out, and that would make it really difficult. We'd be inundated, and the press and the various things. Should I try to pull one of the worms out and forcibly dissect it to see what was going on? Well, the only problem with that was that we were left with the possibility that I might do irreparable damage. That it might be only one worm in this bunch that had the gift of healing, if it was that. Bill and I talked about it for ages, sort of going backwards and forwards over it. And this is where I want you to judge me for our actions. What we decided was that we were unable to control this thing, we were unable to explain it, we were unable to make the most of it because we just didn't have the knowledge. And what we decided to do was to take a boat out to the Marianas Trench and put the ball of worms into the sea, hoping that at some time in the future, somebody with more skill and more knowledge might be able to work out what was happening. Now, I don't know what you think. On the one hand, I've possibly lost the gift of a great medical breakthrough. On the other hand, we were faced with panic, with people desperate to be healed, and we knew we couldn't cope. And we knew that the government or somebody would come in and take over and would maybe mess it up, kill the worms, kill them by accident. So that's what we decided to do, put them back. And now I'm leaving it up to you to judge us and tell us what you think.